Guys, my name is Catherine Elliott, and I'm going to be talking to you about anthrax. Alright, so what is anthrax? Anthrax is an infectious disease that's caused by the bacteria Bacillus anthracis. Anthracis comes from the Greek word for coal, which refers to this symptom of cutaneous anthrax, this blackish char right here. Bacillus anthracis is a rod-shaped, gram-positive, spore-forming bacteria. Its spores are found in the soil and in wild animals throughout the entire world, but in particular in these areas in red that you see over here. There are three forms of anthrax. The first is cutaneous anthrax, which is caused by the entry of a spore through a cut in your skin. The second is inhalation anthrax, which is when you breathe in the spore. And the last is gastrointestinal anthrax, or GI anthrax, which is when you eat the meat from an animal that has been infected with anthrax. So the treatment includes antimicrobial and antitoxin treatment. And how B. anthracis actually infects your body is it will enter through one of three ways, either through your skin, by eating it, or breathing it in, where it will be phagocytized by an immune cell. In this immune cell, the spore will germinate and will create lots of vegetative cells of B. anthracis. There are four components that contribute to the virulence of B. anthracis. The first is the poly-D-glutamic acid capsule. What this does is it makes it so the vegetative cell is unable to be phagocytized by any immune cell, and therefore unable to be destroyed. The next three are proteins that are made by B. anthracis. The first is protective antigen, and what this does is it binds to cell receptors on immune cells. This allows for edema factor and lethal factor, the other two proteins, to enter the cell. And what edema factor does is it activates kinase A. Kinase A is what's responsible for the activation and deactivation of many processes within the cell. But what's important here is that it alters a cell's ability to secrete cytokines, which are the things that tell your body to produce and send white blood cells in that direction. Lethal factor, what it does is it cleaves MAP kinases 1 and 2. MAP kinases 1 and 2 are essential in the production of NADPH, and so without NADPH, you can't make ATP. So when these are cleaved, the cell goes through apoptosis. So the more cells that B. anthracis is able to infect, the more cells that go through apoptosis, which leads to necrosis, which leads to organ failure, which leads to death. So this looks different in the three different types of anthrax. The first type is cutaneous anthrax. So what happens here is the spore will enter through a cut on your skin. Within 2 to 3 days, you'll start to see pimple-looking things that are called papules. These papules will then converge to form a central papule, which will either break or will dry out, revealing this black char right here, which is this black spore or sore-looking thing. Around this black char, you will see this red swelling, which is called an edema. Within 2 to 6 weeks, this sore will redissolve and it will disappear. With the proper antimicrobials, cutaneous anthrax has a mortality rate of less than 1%. So it's not very lethal at all. Inhalation anthrax, on the other hand, is very lethal. What happens here is the spores enter your body by you breathing them in, and then they will be deposited in alveolar spaces in your lungs. Here they're transported to your lymph nodes, where they cause lymphatic disease. They will germinate in the lymph nodes, and they will infect the lymph nodes. And once they infect the lymph nodes, they will travel throughout your body using your circulatory and your lymphatic system. Once they infect different organ systems, these organ systems will fail and you will die. This takes about 2 months to develop. The symptoms, which really fatal about inhalation anthrax, is the symptoms. They are very generic symptoms. Most of the times, doctors in the U.S., especially, because are not able to diagnose anthrax. They're not looking for anthrax. It's very uncommon in the U.S. So most of the time when they see these symptoms, anthrax does not even come to their mind. And because of this, the mortality rate for inhalation anthrax is 80%. Gastrointestinal anthrax is very similar. What happens is you eat raw or undercooked meat from an animal that has been infected. Within 2 to 5 days, you'll start to see symptoms. There are two different types. There's oroesophageal or abdominal. And why there are two different types, it's just the two different parts of your body from your GI tract that the bacteria infects. So in oroesophageal, it infects the organs in your esophageal area. What happens is a blackish char, like the one you see in cutaneous anthrax, will form, causing the edema or the swelling. This will make your neck swell. It will lead to organ failure, which will lead to death. And abdominal anthrax, what happens is the blackish char forms in your intestines, usually in the terminal wall of your ileum or in your cecum. It can form in your stomach or in your duodenum. However, these are less common places for them to form. What happens is at first you're just going to experience like a stomach ache, you're going to feel nauseous, so it's going to be like the common flu. Once the anthrax progresses more, you'll start vomiting blood and you'll start having bloody diarrhea. This is when you know that your organs are failing and you're dying. The antibiotics or the treatment that you will have is antibiotics and antitoxins. Penicillin was first used, but in a strain that was studied in 2001, they found that beta-lactams were present in B. anthracis, so they stopped using penicillin and they are now using just a series of other antibiotics including ciprofloxacin, doxycycline, and amoxicillin. The antitoxin used is Anthem, and what this does is it counterattacks protective antigen, lethal factor, and edema factor by crowding out these cell receptors right here so that they can't bind to the cell. There is a vaccine. The first vaccine was made by Pasteur in 1881. This was used for animals, not for humans. The vaccine that we have now was licensed in 1970. It has a 92.5 efficacy rate. However, it is very expensive to make and it has to be administered 6 times within 18 months. So it is not available for civilian use. They do give it to military personnel, however, because anthrax has a very high threat to be used in biological warfare. So military personnel that go to certain areas of the world have to be vaccinated for anthrax. So it is a high threat for biological warfare because it's easy and inexpensive to make. The CDC said that they gave 3 of their employees with a limited knowledge of biological warfare the task of creating a weaponized version of anthrax, and within a month and $1 million, these employees were able to weaponize anthrax. The attack itself would be odorless and invisible. So the possibility of using anthrax as a weapon was first discovered in 1916 during World War I. Germany and German sympathizers used anthrax to infect cattle, which would deplete their enemy's food source. In the 1930s, Japan's Unit 731 in Manchuria did lots of tests with anthrax. They would test it on prisoners of war. Japan's Unit 731 in Manchuria is responsible for the deaths of 10,000 prisoners of war. In the 1930s and the 1960s, the United States did their own studies with anthrax. We made anthrax bombs and we aerosolized anthrax. This ended in 1969 when Nixon signed an executive order saying that we weren't going to use biological warfare anymore. In 1942 and 1943, Britain tested their anthrax on the island of Grunard. They had an anthrax bomb that they dropped, and it took 280 kilograms of formaldehyde and 40 years to decontaminate the island. The travel ban to Grunard Island was lifted in 1989. And during World War II, they also had an Operation Vegetarian, in which they infected 5 million cattle cakes with anthrax, and they were planning on dropping it on the pastures of Germany so that the cattle would eat them and they would die. This would deplete the food supply of the German army. In 1979, there was an anthrax outbreak on a military base in Russia. We don't know for sure the number of people that died. We know at least 105 people died, but the Russian government never came out with an official statement saying how many people died. In 2001, anthrax was used against the United States in the form of letters. This happened shortly after 9/11. What happened is somebody packaged letters and sent them to several politicians and the New York Times, and these letters had anthrax in them. So when these people opened the letters and the people who handled the letters, they would breathe in these anthrax spores. It killed 5 people and 17 people were made very, very ill. The FBI opened an investigation called Amerithrax. In 2008, they came out with documents saying that they're going to press charges against a Dr. Bruce Ivan. Ivan killed himself before these charges were able to be brought, and in 2010, the FBI formally closed this investigation. So that's Anthrax for you. Thank you guys for watching.